Right now, most of the locations in the world where digital nomads would traditionally be charging their laptops and sipping on coconut water while working away are closed off. I'm here living in Bali. I've been here for the past 2 years. This is my home, but Bali is closed for the foreseeable future, as is almost everywhere else in Asia, unless, for example, you're willing to wait 2 weeks in quarantine in Thailand. But all of these places that were traditionally so popular with roving independent workers are closed off. One place that has not closed throughout this whole pandemic is Mexico. And I have specific experience that I'm going to talk about in this video from me living in Mexico for 2 years. My name is Adrian Field and I am an expat. I can say no longer really a digital nomad because I have been staying put here in Bali for the last 2 years. This is my home and this is where I'm going to be probably for a long time. But I started this whole journey of expat / digital nomadism in 2016 when I left my home in Los Angeles to move to Mexico. And at that time, I didn't know that much about Mexico. I had visited Playa del Carmen a few times in the past, and it was an idyllic, lovely place. Back, we're talking maybe 2010, 2011. And so when I had decided, okay, I have a sufficient business behind me now that I can leave the United States, where am I going to go? I decided on Mexico. And I think that in this current situation, being that Mexico is one of the few countries that's open, it's really interesting to talk about both the advantages, benefits, and the drawbacks about living in Mexico. And I'm going to share my personal experience with you. Some of the popular destinations that people choose in Mexico tend to be Playa del Carmen, Tulum, Mérida, and the capital of Mexico called DF, Distrito Federal. I guess I haven't been practicing my Spanish in a long time because I could hear that accent was absolutely atrocious. I, as I said, chose to start out my journey in Playa del Carmen, and I was there for only 2 months before moving to Tulum, where I stayed for a year and a half. Now, Playa del Carmen is very well trodden on the digital nomad path. There are certain benefits to Playa, which is that it's not far from the international airport of Cancun. You have quite a lot of amenities there that you would be typically used to coming from a first world country. Big supermarkets, any kind of big box stores, hospitals, whatever. That is in Playa del Carmen. But for me, I was 26, 27 years old and very much a yogi hippie, and Tulum sounded much more enticing. So Tulum was already getting to that peak, that summit of its fame as a hippie, not hippie actually, I would say like a jet set destination for boho chic people. And anyway, that's where I ended up moving. Did I know a single person in Tulum? No. Did I speak Spanish when I arrived in Mexico? No. But these are part of the benefits that I'm going to get into about moving to a place like Mexico. Playa del Carmen, I think, is great if you're in your 30s, 40s, even 50s, just because it is a familiar kind of place. It's not that hard to get around. It has good infrastructure. If you have a car, the highways are just like in the United States, except watch out for those topes, which are the speed bumps. They're everywhere in Mexico and they're horrible. I had the worst motorcycle accident of my life on my very first day in Tulum because I didn't see that damn tope, which wasn't even painted, coming back from the beach, and I flew off my bike. Mexico, other locations, the west of Mexico, like Oaxaca, is starting to get kind of popular, but not really having the infrastructure for nomads or expats to live in. So it seems that kind of the Caribbean side is much more popular. Tulum has gone through an unbelievable development, and I was there to witness that firsthand as I was living there for a year and a half. I lived in a private development that just every week a new house was going up in. And Tulum is interesting because it's kind of segregated in the sense that you have the beach side, and that's all tourists, all resorts that are down on the beach. But then you have the town side, which is where a lot of the nomads or expats have their homes or apartments, and it's definitely not as chic or boho as it is on the beach. But I, living in Tulum, hardly ever went down to the beach side. My whole life was kind of centered into that town development. So Tulum has certain attractions, certain drawbacks. Certainly if you like the nightlife and you like to party, Tulum has plenty of that. Infrastructure-wise, there are certain drawbacks. My internet where I was living was painfully slow because we used an antenna and it was something like 2 or 3 megabits a second when we were lucky, and that was hardly good enough to stream on Netflix. But if you're in a different kind of development, then you might have access to a faster internet. Another thing that I found very antiquated and antediluvian was that in order for me to pay the electricity, I had to actually stand in line at some machine that was broken half the time and physically put in cash into this machine to pay for my monthly electricity bill. And then also, speaking of machines that were often not functioning, the ATMs in Tulum half the time were out of cash as well. So those are some of the things that I had dealt with living in Tulum that I found a little bit challenging at times. The reason, though, that I decided to leave Tulum and move to a town that I forgot to mention that is also popular for expats, not so much digital nomads, is San Miguel de Allende. Now you can Google this town, San Miguel de Allende. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's actually won, I think, a Condé Nast Traveler award for the most beautiful city in the world, and it is truly picturesque. So after a year and a half of Tulum, being tired of the heat and the humidity, I decided to move to this place that's in the center of Mexico, just a few hours north of Mexico City in the mountains with a much drier climate. And I rented a big, beautiful house that I really couldn't afford, but you know what happened to me after 6 weeks of living there? That house was broken into, I was robbed very badly, and I left Mexico for good, have not stepped foot back in that country since then. Now, that's not to dissuade you from living in Mexico, because in the over a year and a half that I was in Playa del Carmen and in Tulum, nada me pasó, nada me tocó, nothing happened to me there. So these places were ostensibly more safe, even though you hear constantly in the news of crimes happening in the Riviera Maya, drug-related things, and there are periods where this flares up, and it's a very common sight. You're sitting at a restaurant in the town and you see the militarized police driving through. So this is just sort of a reality of Mexico. Let's talk about some of the benefits of moving to a place like Mexico. So, cuando yo llegué a México, yo no hablaba nada de español. When I arrived in Mexico, I didn't speak a single word of Spanish because I studied French and Italian. I spoke fluent French, and I had studied Italian in university. I actually also, the very first language that I studied in middle school was Latin, which gives you the basis of all the Romance languages. For me, it was very easy to learn Spanish. I started right away taking Spanish classes at one school, first in Playa del Carmen, y después in Tulum, and then afterwards in Tulum. And I would say in about 6 months, I was pretty much fluent. That might just be me because I have a strong capacity for languages, but I just don't find the Spanish language to be particularly difficult. If you put in a little bit of effort and you go to classes, I think within a year, you'll be comfortable. Whereas, compare that to Thailand. You could be there 10 years and most likely you're not going to even reach a medium level of Thai. So that, I think, is a really big benefit. The Mexican culture is very rich, of course. It's funny how close it is proximity-wise to the United States, but still has such a distinct feel to it, and that's something that I appreciated, the sense of really being outside of the United States, but at the same time, there were certain kind of reminders that, okay, I'm still in North America and that this isn't a completely and utterly foreign place. Obviously, Mexican food is great. I was living off of tacos de pescado and tacos de camarones and tacos everything, but there's so much food in Mexico that goes beyond tacos, burritos, even though I got a couple times of really bad food poisoning from eating a burrito. I think there was a restaurant in Tulum called Burrito Amor, something like that, and I got the worst food poisoning of my life there. So anyway, that just happens anywhere in the world, though. I don't think I ever got food poisoning in the United States, so maybe it doesn't happen everywhere in the world, but it happened to me twice in Mexico that I got very bad food poisoning. But there is great food in Mexico. I like Mexican food. Not everybody does, but if you like aguacate, then you will be in heaven in Mexico. So let's talk about some other benefits of living in Mexico. It's one of the easiest places, I think, in the world for a visa if you are a nomad or expat or whatever you want to call yourself. So first of all, coming from a Western country, I'm talking about United States, Canada, Europe, upon arrival as a tourist, you get a 6-month visa. And all you need to do if you wanted to hypothetically renew that visa is leave the country for a day and come back in, and you have a new 6-month visa. This is so simple, and it really makes things very easy, whereas if you're in Thailand, you're stressed because you have to renew every 30 days, and then you have to leave every 60 days, and you know, visas are a big problem in many other countries in the world, especially in Asia. In Mexico, though, it really couldn't be more simple. And if you love Mexico and you think, okay, this is a place I want to live long term, gaining residency there is really not that difficult either. I became a temporary resident of Mexico. The process consisted of going to the Mexican embassy in the United States, and I had to show a certain net worth via bank statements over 12 months. And I have a IRA account, and I was able to show that, and it was very easy. I became a temporary resident. Actually, the most complicated part of this was doing what they call the trámite, when you have to then go back to Mexico and you go back and forth to the immigration office, and they gave me a very hard time because I did it by myself. I didn't do it with an agent. And I remember they made me come back like twice because they said my signature didn't match the signature in my passport. But those were minor annoyances and inconveniences. The point is, if you really love Mexico and you want to live there, it's quite easy to become a resident, and even eventually, I mean, if you are obsessed, to become a citizen. So that is, I think, one of the biggest benefits of being in Mexico. Obviously, no place is perfect, and Mexico certainly has its drawbacks. For me, at the top of the list, how can I not say crime, because my house was broken into and I was robbed very badly. Now, you could say that that was an unlucky experience. I was robbed also living in Los Angeles, so it's not like this experience only happens to you in Mexico. But obviously this left a very bad taste in my mouth. My general thoughts on crime anywhere in the world are just that you need to kind of be smart and look after yourself. I'm not someone who's out very late at night anywhere in the world. I'm not out doing drugs and drinking and putting myself in positions where someone could take advantage of me. I think that living in Mexico, like anywhere else, you just kind of have to have your wits about you, and that's the reality of living there. As I said, some of the other drawbacks for me about Mexico, but I think this is kind of specific to where I was, Tulum, was just that certain things were infrastructure-wise difficult, like paying the monthly electricity, and sometimes the cash machines were out of cash, and just, you know, little things like that. But Tulum is a little pueblo, you know, like this isn't a big city, so you have to expect that there are going to be kinds of things like that. If you're in a big city, obviously the situation is not the same. I got to visit Mexico City just for a few days after my house was broken into and I was robbed, because I had to go to the American embassy and get an emergency passport to leave the country. And I was shocked at actually how seemingly livable Mexico City was. I think that, especially in America, we have this perception of Mexico City as being so overcrowded and polluted, and that's not what I experienced or saw. I saw a very European-style city that had so much greenery, and I thought to myself, wow, I almost wish that I lived here in Mexico City and didn't live in Tulum, you know, or anywhere else, because it had so much to offer. So I think that Mexico, being a very big country, you can go to different places and find kind of what your vibe is and where you fit in. Don't feel like, oh, everybody's in Playa del Carmen, so I have to go to Playa del Carmen. Maybe use Playa as your starting point. It's a good kind of way into Mexico because there are so many other extranjeros, so many other digital nomads there, you know, and then you can kind of get a feel for it and take language classes and start to get more comfortable and then branch out, and maybe you'll find some other place is better for you than Playa del Carmen. So that's just, you know, something to consider. It's a big country, offers many diverse experiences. All right, let's talk cost of living because this is a subject that interests everyone who's considering to move to Mexico. I found Mexico to be a pretty affordable place. When I moved there, I did not have much money. I rented a 1-bedroom home in Tulum for the equivalent of around $500 a month. And this was a new construction, and it was a lovely place, and it was actually rare, especially at that time, to find like a 1-bedroom home in Tulum, because generally they are building for families, or they're building for, you know, retirees or people who are coming and buying houses, buying 2-3 bedroom houses. But of course I didn't need that, being by myself with my dog. So I was spending $500 a month on rent. I bought myself a little Italica, which is the Mexican brand motorbike. The actually thing to note about that, it's not like Southeast Asia where you can rent a motorbike by the month, which is very easy to do in Thailand and in Indonesia and basically everywhere else in Asia. In Mexico, that is really not common, so you need to go there prepared to buy your own motorbike if that's how you are planning to get around, and if you're planning to stay there for a long time. It's also not that difficult to resell. Mexico has a really big resale market. People, you know, are always looking out for deals. So whatever you buy, you can eventually resell. When I left Mexico, I sold everything. My TV, my motorbike, whatever I had, there was somebody there who wanted to buy it. Food-wise, obviously depends on where you're going, what kind of level of restaurant, but, you know, you can get tacos for nothing. You know, if you're eating like the Mexicans do, it's very cheap. I ate so much amazing seafood every single day that I lived in Tulum. I'm really actually missing that style of preparation. I love that Mexican seafood that I would eat in Playa del Carmen and in Tulum. That's very affordable. So, you know, also there weren't so many things to spend my money on living in Mexico. Like, I have many more temptations or things that I can spend my money on living in Bali, for example, than I did in Tulum. Maybe that's also because I have a lot more money now than I did back then, but in Tulum there's just not that much to do. You can go to the beach, you can do yoga, you can go to sound healings, but where else are you going to spend your money? There's really like not that kind of, you know, infrastructure or activities. You know, there's not like a big mall that you can go to unless you go to Cancun or even Playa. I mean, has a couple more upscale stores, but there's just not that much to spend money on. So if you're kind of in your hippie, yogi, beginning of your digital nomad phase where you're not wanting to, you know, be a baller, I think that Mexico, you know, kind of offers also a good entry level point for that. Ultimately, I think with Mexico, it just really comes down to what your personality is, of whether or not you're going to love it there. I think that obviously there are so many people who really feel at home in Mexico and love it. And I really appreciated my time living there, and I really am happy that I learned Spanish from that experience. I think that's a great life skill to have. But for me, I just didn't ever really feel completely at home in Mexico. I just feel like my heart and my soul really belongs in Asia. So for me, there was a kind of spiritual depth that was lacking in Mexico. And Mexico has its own spirituality. I'm not criticizing, I'm just talking about what my soul resonates with. In Mexico, obviously, I'm talking about not the Catholic religion, I'm talking about the people that are really into kind of the shamanism, which is, there is so much of that in Tulum. You know, that doesn't resonate with me. So, you know, again, depends on what kind of person are you, what are you looking for in a community. But Mexico, I think, being that it's open, being that you have the option to actually go there where much of the world is closed off, is a very great option. So if you're sitting at your desk right now, and you're depressed, if you're in Paris because it's locked down again, en fait, je devrais vous adresser en français si vous êtes là en France, mais là, déjà, si vous regardez cette vidéo, c'est parce que vous comprenez l'anglais. Okay, back to English. If you're sitting somewhere and you're thinking, I'm depressed because I'm in lockdown, nothing is open where I am, go to Mexico. You'll actually have a really good time there, and it's a great place to begin your nomad journey, to get your feet wet into the experience of what it's like to live in a different country, live abroad. I think that it is a lot easier than, for example, showing up in Thailand and not knowing anything, or even showing up in Indonesia and not knowing anything. Though, you know, you have to have a certain level of just courage and the conviction that you're going to figure things out as you go along. And I think my biggest recommendation for any place is that you go on Facebook and you join the expat community groups, because there you'll find everything and you can network with people. But Mexico really is not that challenging of a place. And don't feel intimidated even if you don't speak Spanish. But if you don't speak any Spanish, I would recommend that you start out in a place like Playa del Carmen, where there are many expats, where you can kind of get a feel for things. You can start your Spanish lessons, and then after 6 months to a year where you're more confident in your language ability, go branch out. Go discover what they call the real Mexico. Go to Mérida, go to the capital, go to San Miguel de Allende, but make sure you lock your windows and your doors. And there are many beautiful places, as I said. Go and discover Mexico. Even though I got robbed there, and I will probably not go back for a very long time, if ever, I still recommend it as a place for other people, because I think that the country has a lot to offer. It has a beautiful culture, it has great food, it has amazing landscapes. It's a fascinating country. So that's really what I wanted to talk about for this video. I kind of wanted to give an update because it was one of the very first videos that I ever published on this channel, but it was when I had basically 0 subscribers and had no idea even how to record a video or edit it properly. So I thought that I would give this a second time around and hope that it is useful to anybody who is considering Mexico now as a destination to escape these draconian lockdowns. And until the next video, guys, take care. Hope everyone is doing well. See you later. Bye-bye.